The reading is from 1 Samuel, verse 8. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. Yet his sons did not follow in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways. Appoint for us, then, a king to govern us like other nations." But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to govern us." Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them, just as they have done to me from the day I brought them out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So also they are doing to you. Now then, listen to their voices. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the way of the king who shall reign over them." So Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots, to be his horsemen, and to run before the chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves." But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel. They said, "No, we are determined to have a king over us, so that we may also be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles." The Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to their voice and set a king over them."
I hate talking about politics, and this is something that I'm going to be kind of talking about today. Just a word of mouth, don't hit me, please. If you have to hit me, just avoid the face. You can't talk about politics anymore without people getting really upset. It used to be that, they'd say just don't talk politics because it makes people uncomfortable. Now they just want to lash at you and punch you, and I don't want to get punched, so please don't punch the pastor. We should put that sign on the door. We are in the middle of a series called 15 Texts from the Bible, and what these are just 15 texts that I feel like the ones that we can talk about and things like that. They're not by far the only texts that you should ever read and everything like that, but they're just ones that I think are important, and the timing of this one just is coincidental. I know that we had like presidential debates and there's things going on in France and all of that kind of stuff. It really is just coincidental that a number of years ago, many, many years ago in fact, there was a guy named Samuel. And Samuel is probably one of the most spiritual people in the Bible. He had his calling from childhood, very, very young. He was raised by spiritual leaders, and as a child, he heard the voice of God, and he remained a very spiritual person. And what his role became is he was known as what they would call a judge. Now, judges today, we see them in the court and all that kind of stuff and everything like that. But at the time, Israel had no king. From the time that they left Egypt with Moses, they had no king. They had people called judges, which were kind of like spiritual leaders. They would only come to do their job when they were needed. If it was like a dispute, if you guys were having a dispute or something, then a judge would come in and help mediate, talk about that. Or if there was a thing that involved the entire community, there were wars at that time and everything like that, the judges would come and they would give spiritual counsel for that. The idea was that the Israelites were following God as their king. God was their king, and the judges were kind of interpreters of what God had in mind and wanted. And so people would console with the judges and things like that. And this was going along really well. It kind of started with Moses getting them out of the the whole Egypt thing. They established it from there. And now we are, many years have passed, and Samuel is in this role. And he's getting on in age. And what he wants to do is he starts to think about who can he appoint to be judges after him. And he makes a very big mistake. He puts his sons in the role. Now, Samuel was a very, very spiritual and disciplined person, but his sons weren't. They were very much, they worshiped material goods rather than spiritual goods. They would take bribes. They could be swayed. And the people of Israel were starting to say, okay, this is a really crooked thing. We don't like this going on. We look around, and all of the populations around us, they have these cool things called kings. And these kings are really awesome. They're like warriors. You know, they've got the gold and all this, the fancy stuff and everything like that. We want one of those. I mean, we got old Samuel that's telling us what God thinks, but we want a king. We want to be like other people. And so they go to Samuel and they say, hey, give us a king. This is what we want. Everybody around here has it. The Philistines and all of those guys, they've got these cool kings. Can we have one of those? And Samuel gets a little bit hurt by this because he's a religious leader. He's been, first off, he's hurt because he feels it's a knock on himself, that he hasn't been doing a good job of being their spiritual leader, that they want somebody else. I mean, it's a normal reaction to that. But the second thing is the thing that they said about we want to be like other people. The Israelites were not supposed to be like other people. They were supposed to be unique. They were supposed to be, they were the first population to hear about the monotheistic God, the one true God. And they were tasked with being separate from everybody and carrying that message forward. That was their job until when Christ came and that message exploded out to everybody else. But at this point, the Israelites are supposed to be different. We're not supposed to follow everybody else. They're following all the kings because they don't know about God. Our king is God. We're supposed to follow God, not a person. We're supposed to follow perfection. And so Samuel goes to God and he says, hey, they're doing that thing where they want a king and all this kind of stuff. And the neat thing is that the first thing that God does is he seems to comfort Samuel. He says, hey, listen to the people, but they're not attacking you. They're attacking me. Since we got out of Egypt and we've been trying to do this follow God thing, unfortunately, people have turned to idolatry and they've worshipped other gods and all this kind of stuff. They're doing that same thing now, except for building a god and worshiping that. They want a person that they can put on a throne and actually worship a person. They want to idolize a person rather than me. And he says, Samuel, don't take it out on them. Don't worry about it. I give people freedom of choice. This is what they're wanting. You can give it to them, but warn them. Warn them what it's going to be like if they stop using me as a king and start using a person as a king. So Samuel goes to the people and he says, hey, if you follow this king, he's going to take your sons and he's going to make them soldiers. He's going to make them on the front line to protect him and his chariots. He's going to take your daughters. He's going to make them work for him. Everybody in your family is going to be divided because they are going to be working not for Israel or for God anymore, but for the king. Do you really want that? And he says, and be careful because he's going to take 1/10 of everything that you own and it's going to serve him. And he even points it out very strictly by saying, you will be his slave. But the Israelites at this time, they're going, I don't want to hear about all that kind of stuff. We want what they have. They have like superheroes over here with the shiny things and the helmets and all this kind of stuff. They look good and everything like, let's get one of those things that we could put up there and all that kind of stuff. So he goes back to God and he says, they are twits. These people are morons. I don't want anything to do with them. Can I become a Philistine? And he says, no, that's not true. But he says, give them what they want. Appoint them a king. And we've gone downhill ever since. The first king that he appoints is a guy named Saul. Saul looked the part. It says in the Bible that Saul was very good looking. He stood out among a crowd. He was very tall, Not that tallness has anything to do with looks. But if you saw him coming in a group of people, you would say, that guy looks like a king. He looks like a superhero. And see, all their life, the Israelites, they didn't have that. They followed people like Samuel, which was this old guy. And way before, they followed Moses, which was a stuttering guy that he didn't want to lead anybody. He stammered. He wasn't good with speech and all this kind of stuff. And he ends up leading them out of Egypt. But none of the guys fit the part until they see Saul. Oh, he was a handsome lad, he was. And so they make him his king. Starts out pretty good for a while, and then it just all goes to pot. He does exactly what God foresaw. He starts doing things for himself. He starts getting them involved in wars that they shouldn't be. He starts making it all about himself and his family and everything and all this kind of stuff. It just goes crazy and it's weird. And it goes so much that in the middle of his reign, everybody is saying, we got to get someone else. And so Saul goes and looks for another king. And he finds David. David's promising because David doesn't look like a king. David's got these brothers that are all built and everything like that, but David's just this little guy. And instead of being a warrior, he's a feeler. He likes to write poetry and songs. And so they say, okay, David fits the thing. You know, he's a noble and all that kind of stuff. We'll make him a king. So they take Saul and put him on. Okay, this is the guy right here, David. And for a while, things are looking pretty good. David, to this day, is even considered one of the best kings that Israel ever had. But he's flawed, and he starts messing up. Again, he starts collecting things for himself. He starts to get caught up in the power, so much so that he likes somebody's wife, and in order to get her, he kills her husband. He starts to become a person that he wasn't when they picked him. The power starts to get to him. His family becomes so dysfunctional that it becomes violent, and it's just a mess. And we've been that way ever since. We have followed people to the warning of God. We have followed people instead of God. We put all our faith into that person. We hear around this time of year a person saying, I will save everything. I will make everything right. And we go, oh, this is the one. This is the one. This is our Saul. And then about a year later, we're like, he's so disappointing. Doesn't do anything what we wanted. The honeymoon is over. And we have repeated this for thousands of years. When God warns, you have a God, you have a king, and that's me. But then we get kind of confused because we have like Paul in Romans, and he says this, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist have been instituted by God. So are we supposed to look at this and say, okay, we got ourselves in the mess ever since, Saul and on up and everything like this. We've appointed kings and governors and mayors and presidents and all of this kind of stuff, and it's always gotten us just in a heartache, but are we supposed to follow them blindly? Is that what we're supposed to do because that's what Paul says? Well, theologians have gone back and forth on this one, because there has been many times that people of great faith have had to oppose the leadership in order to protect the people. Paul himself went away from this by just being a Christian and starting a church. He was jailed many times. He did fight authority in many ways. Peacefully, he fought authority. We've seen it in more of our modern sense with a person like Martin Luther King Jr., who did go against authority in many ways. Many of the things that Martin Luther King did peacefully were still considered illegal, but it was for the right cause. He was serving God. And so we have to look at this and we say, there is no authority except from God. That means that we have to look at all of our authority, all of our governing officials, as people that should be following God. And if they're not, then we have a decision to make. We have things that we have to do. Whether it's Martin Luther King, whether it's marching, whether it is resisting, whether it is voting. That's what we do as Christians. We are to make sure that we are still serving God. Because we had this wonderful thing. We have Jesus to compare. We know that we have a one true God. And we have a one true King. And that God even saw this whole thing coming out many years before. We are at Samuel right here, and we are doing all this kind of stuff. But I'm going to take us right back to Moses again. Remember Moses, the stammering guy that took him out of in the desert, and while they're walking into the desert, he has conversations with God. Well, God predicted something way before any of this happened. And he said, hey, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, and have taken possession of it and settled in it, you are going to say, let us have a king over us, like all the other nations. Be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. In other words, be sure that the person that you put in charge is following the one that's really in charge. Be sure that you have somebody that is truly following God. He gives more. He says, the king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. What he's talking about here is he better not get greedy. He better not make it all about him. This is what he's talking about. This commandment, this rule that he's giving right off the bat, this is years before. They haven't even talked about a king yet, but he's giving them a foreshadowing. They better not make it about themselves. They better not acquire stuff just for themselves. No buildings, no things that honor you, no monuments with your name on it, none of that stuff. It's about serving me. And make sure that whoever you put in the role of king follows that. He even says, when he has taken the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself a copy of this law on a scroll. The thing that I just mentioned, write that on a scroll in the presence of the priest. In other words, in the presence of a spiritual advisor. Remember, you may be a king, but the spiritual advisors advise you. That's how it's supposed to be. The judges still are supposed to exist. They are still supposed to be able to give the counsel to the person in charge, so that person in charge is double-checked to make sure that they are following God. And he says the scroll shall remain with him. He shall read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God. Now, we don't mean fear like, ooh, we mean fear like, ah, okay? Simplest way I can put it. Must do that diligently, observing all the words of this law and these statutes. In other words, memorize that you are here because I let you be here. And if you are in a position where you are governing over people, you better be doing my will. Not yours. You better be doing mine. And this is part of it. Neither exalting himself above other members of the community, nor turning aside from the commandment, either to the right or to the left, so that he and his descendants may reign long over the kingdom of Israel. We don't have a lot of lineage of descendants that have been presidents and kings and all of this kind of stuff. We've had little pockets of this, but it has not lasted forever because they keep screwing it up. This simple thing of that you're not above the people, you're not above them, we continue to screw that up. It seems as soon as someone gets into power, they forget that. They forget their true role, which is to honor God. And God warned us about it in Samuel's day, and he warned us about it in Moses' day. That if you start putting your faith just in one person, you're going to have to accept the flaws of that person. That person is not going to always find, even if they are a person of faith, there are times where they are going to be following the polls rather than the religious leaders. They are going to be in conflict. And unfortunately, sometimes they associate themselves with people that really aren't religious leaders. They appoint themselves with someone that they have in common, no matter what their name is, whether it's a spiritual advisor, leader, whether it's a governor. The thing that they seem to have in common is they want to have power. and they want to have power for themselves. And it's something God warned us about many, many years ago. So what do we do in this case? We are in a mess right now. We have all of these kings, and we have all these governors. We have all kinds of stuff. What do we do? Do we resist? Do we say, I'm just going to follow God. You guys do your thing, we'll do our thing. Well, see, there's a problem when we want to do that, because as Paul said, we are in this middle world here right now. We used to be the slaves of sin before we knew Christ. Christ came in, resurrected, so the kingdom starts. And now we wait for the second coming of Christ, but until then, we have something that they did not have in Deuteronomy or in 1 Samuel. We have the knowledge of Christ. We have the knowledge of Christ, the true King. We have the knowledge of God on earth being crowned King. And how did He do it? What example did He give us? Did He build monuments for Himself? Did He build towers with His name on it? Did He buy all kinds of stuff? Did He take the gold and the silver and keep it for Himself? Did He live in a mansion? Did He tell us to fight each other? Did He tell us that anyone that doesn't agree with us is the scum of the earth? Did He send us to war? Did He talk about how powerful He was in strength? Did He form armies? Did He have people around Him continually serving Him? Did He try to check in with whether or not He was popular? And did He sway His opinion about what He was teaching to make sure that He kept the masses? Or did He start out in this world incredibly poor financially and remain that way? Did He walk on foot from town to town, welcoming everybody? Did He talk to us about being there to feed the hungry? Did He talk to us about being there to clothe the people that are cold? Did He reach out to heal people no matter who they were? Did He stretch beyond His religion and even welcome people on the outside? Did He push for enemies, or did He push for neighbors? That's who we follow. Was He a servant when He stood on the cross and gave His life for us? Did He value us more than Himself on that day? That's who we follow. That's who our King is. As we live in this world, we have to try everything we can. We are the echo of that. We are the reflection of that. We are the ambassadors of that. So we try our best to make sure that others experience that. We can do that by talking about it and sharing in our everyday lives. And we can also do it in the world of politics, in the world of all of this stuff. We can do it when we go vote. We can do it when we help people that are being repressed. We can do that when we say the way that these folks are being treated is not fair and it is not right. We are the voices of Christ. And so when we do things like that, when I go and when I vote, I'm really not a big political guy. If this is your first day here, we don't talk politics all the time. We talk donuts more than we talk politics. We really do, and rightfully so, because they never let you down. But I vote. I'm not big into politics. I still envision a world where we all can sit at the same table and worship Christ. And I see much of that here. We have people of all different walks of life and story and all of that kind of stuff. And we come here and we sing in unison and we share communion together and we share the love of Christ. I still believe in that. But when I do go to the poll, when I do go to vote, I ask myself, I first remind myself that whoever I vote for is a flawed person. I remind myself that nobody's going to be perfect except Christ. But am I voting for somebody in my mind that represents Christ more than the others? Am I voting for the message of Christ? Love, caring for others, all of that kind of stuff. Am I saying that in my vote and in what I do? In other words, even when I go and vote, am I practicing what I preach? That's very important to me. It's hard. It's hard. In a world today, we have a lot of voices hitting us, a lot of voices that tell us, make us believe that this person is going to be it, or this person's going to be it. We still look for the people that look the part and forget about the Moses who stuttered, or Samuel that was frail, or any of the other people that have served God that didn't look like they were the action hero of the time. Do we clear our head? Do we vote the way that we think shares the passion of Christ? I don't have an answer for you. The one thing I hope that you don't come out of here is that, oh, Pastor told us who to vote for. I hope you don't hear that. I don't want that, because that's where people are going to start punching me. And I don't want that. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I think that the perfect world is that when we vote for this person and we meet a person that votes for the other person, we can still love each other. That's the world I hope for, is that we can get along. I'm not here to make enemies. I'm not here to say anything. I'm just here to make us remember that in all things, we follow Jesus Christ. That's our King. What is he telling you to do? Would you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, it's hard when we put our faith into people. It always is. Help us remember that we can put our faith in you. We can always put our faith in you. Help us by guiding us and giving us inspiration and being there for us. Help us live the way that you want us to live. And help us do what you want us to do. Help us to remember that you are our King. In Jesus' name, Lord, we pray. Amen.